The sound of pages turning means it's time for another episode from the Meredith Library Podcast Studio, bringing you the library's latest news, information, and fun.
Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to episode number 50 of Check It Out here on the Meredith Library Podcast Studio. And our sharp-eared listeners will notice that I did not say good afternoon, MaryBeth, as we always start off talking to each other because MaryBeth, unfortunately, could not be with us today. However, we have a special guest in studio, Archivist Carola Davis, so she is going to celebrate episode number 50 with me and be interviewed about her fascinating career and talk about the archives available here at the Meredith Public Library. So, welcome, Carola.
It's great to be here, Matthew. Now,
we've known each other a couple years since I've worked here, and I'm going to find out all kinds of exciting things about you today that I did not know before. And are you ready to spill all those archivists and archival secrets?
Oh, a few.
I already introduced you just very briefly, but why don't you introduce yourself in more detail and tell us some fun facts about you?
Sure. Well, I've been a professional archivist for about 30 years. So I've had an opportunity to work in various kinds of archives and also in museums.
Oh, fascinating.
And so I've dealt with lots of different kinds of collections, but my heart is really with archival collections, and hopefully I'll be able to tell you some stories about why. I am new to New Hampshire at least the last 6 years. I was born in California and grew up there. My grandparents were immigrants. My paternal grandfather came from Spain, from the Basque land, so I'm half Basque, and he came to northern Washington and became a sheep herder his whole life. And in fact, one of the recipes in our Meredith Public Library cookbook is one of the hearty cakes that they used to make out when they had a chuck wagon that followed the sheepmen around.
Oh, that's so cool.
My other grandfather, my maternal, is from Greece. And so through my archives and genealogy research, I actually connected with both sides of my family in Europe and made a roots trip to see each one. And it was fascinating.
Yeah, so you got to combine your professional and personal interests.
Yeah, and I think a lot of archivists are very interested in genealogy because we deal with a lot of family history collections, and you have to start understanding those relationships as you do in genealogy.
All right, excellent. So let's get right into it. So what interested you in archival work in the first place?
Well, an archivist is someone who works in an archive, which is a physical building that can be an archive on its own, or it could be part of a museum. It could be part of a corporation. It could be a hospital, a business. Many, many areas have to keep records. And that's what an archivist does, is preserves and makes accessible records and documents that help us to understand history if we preserve them. Right now, as we can see in contemporary culture, files are very important. And there's a record that lasts if we keep it into perpetuity, hopefully. And that's really our challenge as an archivist. Our job as an archivist is to take vast quantities of paper, 10, 20, 30, 150 boxes of documents to sort out.
The infamous dusty boxes.
Yes, in the attic or in the basement, which I've spent a lot of time in those two places. Retrieving important things. And so our job is really to make sense of whether there's an original order to them, describe them, arrange them, and then use our preservation techniques to think about these records lasting into the future. And because there's many formats, you have maps, plans, drawings, photographs, different kinds of documents, scrapbooks, a lot of different media to learn about, and each one has its own preservation techniques.
Okay, fascinating.
So I kind of got into it when I re-entered school after a couple of other careers and decided I wanted to be an arts librarian.
All right.
I always wanted to be a librarian. And so I decided I wanted to work in an arts college.
Mm-hmm.
So I went back to UC Berkeley to finish my art history degree. And while I was in school there in California, I got a student job in the Bancroft Library, which is a very a university archive for Western history in California. And I was lucky enough to be put in the archives division.
Mm-hmm.
And I had an incredible mentor, Mary Morganti, who started teaching me about how to process what they call process archives, to my delight. And as soon as I started handling all that paper, I just was in heaven.
Oh, that's wonderful. So you found your calling.
I did. And the thing I liked about it was every single collection that I worked on was different. And because you look at every piece of paper and you scan and read everything, you're constantly learning about new things.
Mm-hmm.
And because I'm a very eclectic person, I just love learning about new things. And you almost become a specialist once you've finished with that collection because you've read everything that's in it and you really have a good understanding of what the collection holds. And in that way, you're able to help researchers find things.
Before we get on with our kind of more formal questions, I just wanted to mention for the listeners, too, that one of the reasons that we're having this interview with you is to let people know that the Meredith Public Library does indeed have archives. One of the reasons why you're here is to talk about your career in archives in general, but also to let people know what we have and encourage people to use them as well. So that's something for them to keep in the back of their mind as we go through our questions today, and then maybe we'll follow up with that. Anyway, so let's get back to then in your career, which has been long and varied. What is the most interesting discovery, either local or just in general, because I know you're from California, that you have made in an archive?
Because I was asked by Aaron, the library director here, to go down into the basement and explore the 4 huge file cabinets full of the library's history, which in the process of doing that, I made an incredible discovery. And
all right.
I had a number of ledgers in the collection because even though the library opened here in 1901, the library existed before that in town, and it was sort of moved from several houses to several houses with different librarians.
Yes.
And during that time, they kept large journals with, books that were acquired, who checked the books out, the different statistics that librarians need to keep. And so there was about 30 of those journals in the collection. And as I was leafing through them, one day, some letters fell out of one of them. And a couple of them were just very insignificant letters about, I need a new red typewriter ribbon, and something else about I owe 5 cents. Here's a stamp for my overdue book
that's
instead.
So funny. Yeah, that's funny.
But the third letter was very interesting because it was on White House stationery.
And you're like, wait, it's like that dun 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 music in the background?
Yes, and I opened the letter and started reading it and went to the bottom, and it was signed by Calvin Coolidge.
That's amazing.
And it was from 1926 when he was president.
Right, and that's a very rare find, I would think, because all those presidential libraries you would think they already have all those things that are out there existing, especially, 100 years later.
Yes, and there is a copy of this letter in the National Archives, but not the original one, because the original one was mailed to the recipient, who was David Lawrence. And David Lawrence was a publisher who founded the U.S. Daily at that time in 1926, which was the first sort of subscription newspaper that talked about the daily news from what was happening in Congress and so forth. The letter was commending David Lawrence for beginning this newspaper. He became the founder of U.S. News and World Report, later on a very famous journalist.
If I remember correctly, the last time I heard the story or been involved in it, we don't know how the letter ended up from David to here. Am I jumping ahead or?
My theory.
Oh, good. All right. Let's have the theory.
Is that perhaps the Lawrence family, as I've been looking at the history of Meredith, had a summer home here.
That makes sense.
They had a family connection here, and he may have come to Meredith one summer to vacation and checked out some books from the library.
Mm-hmm.
And perhaps he left that letter in one of the books when he returned it. The strangest thing about this letter is that the librarian at the time, who with these two other letters that I found, had used all three for scratch paper.
Oh my God. You think a presidential letter being used as scrap paper? That seems so
Yes.
crazy.
And on the back of this presidential letter, at least she wrote in pencil, she had lists and lists of numbers of books or something she was taking inventory of on all three of these pieces of paper. And so it's kind of interesting to speculate even more, why would she use
Right. Well,
a presidential letter for scratch paper? That I don't have the answer to.
well, I have two. And one's more flippant and one maybe more reasonable. So
Yes.
my first theory is that maybe paper was more of a dear commodity at the time, so you couldn't waste it no matter what it was. And my second, more flippant theory is she was not of the same political party as the president. We'll never
Perhaps.
know. or perhaps you will discover something that will answer the question at a future time. All right.
Yes.
That's awesome. What a fun story, though. And really showed that you don't know what kind of things you may discover as you go along in your career. So I think that's great. All right. So let's see. Then, all right. Well, speaking of, well, you mentioned you like things from a certain time period. So I'm going to say, what is the oldest material that you have personally viewed and or handled?
Well, when I worked at the Bancroft Library, I was able to process a collection of Manila galleon ship manifests that were from the 16th century.
So the 1500s, yeah.
Yeah. And then I've also, in the Bancroft Library, got to hold in my hands a copy of The World Encompassed, which is the book that was written about Sir Francis Drake's circumnavigation of the world. And that was from 1628.
In this long and varied career and fascinating career that you're sharing with us, do you have any experience visiting or working in some of the famous archives? And you might notice I chose as the example the Vatican archives or the National Archives because those are the only two that I know until today.
Yes, I have visited archives actually around the world, many in the United States. One of the things in my park career that was so wonderful was that when you are a professional archivist, when you visit places like the National Archives, you get behind-the-scenes tours.
Oh, that's cool, yeah.
And for example, when I was at the National Archives, they were processing the Wright brothers' papers. And so we got to see and talk to the archivist there about, the actual letters and documents and the business records of the Wright brothers, which was pretty fantastic.
Yeah, definitely.
And I have been to the Smithsonian.
Well, I should have thought of that one as an archive.
And these are places I've had behind-the-scenes tours, which, you get to go back in the stacks where everything's stored, and then those archivists pull out their treasures.
And while I was not a part of this original recording, I'm here to tell you that we are breaking up this wonderful interview with Carola Davis into multiple episodes. So please join us next week for part 2. And Matthew, there was no way I was going to let you celebrate our 50th episode without me.
Podcast music titled Daytime TV Theme by Kevin MacLeod of Incompetech.com. Licensed under Creative Commons by Attribution 4.0.
Podcast copyright 2026, Meredith Library Podcast Studio.